morning. Welcome to this morning's meditation space. Oh, hi, good morning, Paras. Wow, from India. I guess the time is different there. So, I'm just going to read some things to you this morning and, yeah, just do some sharing. I've messed around with the lights this morning and I don't know what's going on, so you'll just have to bear with it. Good morning, Mandy. I have things going on with the lights in here. I switched them off and now the lights in there are creating all sorts of interesting things. Anyway, good morning, blessings to you all. I have been gifted this beautiful book. It's An Explosion of Love, The Colour of All Things Beautiful by TigMonk. I'll show you the cover, it's really beautiful. Hopefully you can see that okay. So I thought I would actually share something out of here. I don't know what, I'll just open it and see what happens. Okay. So this is probably going to be about 20 minutes, I don't know. I've just set an alarm, so we'll see what happens. If you go into this self-inquiry with a hidden agenda to support your mental dream, then you may only experience frustration or a deepening of delusion. You must really be willing to let it all go and begin again to see life with new eyes. Often awakening occurs after tremendous hardship, once it is fully realized that you don't know anything and become sincerely humbled. It's not to say hardship is a required prerequisite to awakening. It is just that hardship and suffering often soften the heart and make space for new insight. In truth, all it really takes is sincerity. Sincerity is simply being honest with yourself. To put it more directly, it is honesty to admit that you don't know what to do, that you don't know who you are, and nor do you know the future. However, we live in a society that believes sincerity to be a weakness, so people spend their whole lives trying to convince themselves that they do know what to do. They do know who they are, and they know how life will or should unfold. We call this worldly confidence, yet in silence the most worldly confident people suffer. The suffering manifests itself as a fear of losing what they are most confident about. This fear takes the shape of anger, treating others poorly, not being genuinely honest, hidden sadness, and alike. Such a movement of worldly confidence is rewarded by society, because it is thought to be the answer to the inadequacy we feel. You think that if you could have certainty about your actions, about what you are, and about the future, you could then relax and have peace. This is a delusion that has manifested the collective consciousness of mankind. Please see clearly here, I am not suggesting this sort of confidence is wrong or it should not be, nor am I saying that it has less value than a different kind of confidence. The mind is so quick to assume that because I'm talking about it, I must be trying to define it as right or wrong, which is simply not the case. The invitation is simply to look at your own experience and discern if your interpretation of this writing can point to your source of suffering. If there is a key, it is sincerity. Who hasn't had an experience of being honest, even though it hurt, only to find freedom waiting for you with open arms? A good cry is often a friend of sincerity. Hanging on to false confidence hurts, but you keep pushing forward because your conditioning tells you that false confidence is the way to liberation. But in truth, it only leads you down a path that has no end. It is like believing if you just got that promotion, your suffering would subside. The challenge here is that your moments of sincerity are often short-lived, as you continue to engage in a game of pretending that everything is fine, when you really know your heart is broken. You may pretend that you are not sad when sadness is happening. You may pretend that you are not angry when anger is happening. You may pretend to know what to do, when in truth you have no clue. Awakening happens when you lay it down and fully admit that life is undefinable in the mind. For when you try to define life by holding on to your labels or trying to get life to conform to your mental dream, it is at that moment that you become lost. What am I if I am not these labels? At this point, I'm tempted to just stop. Going any further into this question can be a two-edged sword. As you empty your mind of all the labels, judgments and ideas that you've used to define yourself with, it can be very easy from this point to just find new labels. It's easy because with new labels it can almost seem as a new beginning, and with this comes a sense of relief that has sprung from the release of the old labels. Such a thing can have value. However, it is not my intent to give you something else to cling to, in the replacement of some other delusion. If you did such a thing, it would be similar to that of one who bounces around from one religion to another, or from one belief to another, believing something new has been found and constructing a new self-centre around new ideas. Do you see through how this practice of bouncing around only substitutes one delusion for another, rather than helping you to wake up? Don't get me wrong. Such a thing can lead you to a willingness to just let it all go. However, I'm going straight for the heart of the matter, with no detours. What am I, if I am not these labels? Imagine yourself in silence. You are all alone with your present awareness, your simple but profound existence. As you watch yourself breathe, just notice the breath. I'm not asking for the mind to comment on it. I'm simply inviting you to be aware of this moment. Do you notice the presence of you? Again, not the mental comments about you, but the awakeness or the awareness of you. The same presence that has been there your whole life, the part of you that has been unchanged. This is the real you, behind a facade. This is the one behind the sound, behind a breath, the one who all this is happening to. This is the honest you. This is the you that exists before everything outside of you. If you find difficulty in feeling this presence that I am pointing to, it is because you are trying to find it with comments from your mind. Give the mind permission to rest, even if only just for this moment, so that you may hear the sound of your soul. Can you sense the most primary element of your humanness? The part of you that just simply is here, is always here and is always in this moment. What is this that rests? Yes, it is true that such a thing can be difficult to notice. if the mind is so chaotic. The mind has become a distraction, a point of interest that now serves as an addiction. However, it isn't so much the mind itself as it is our addiction to its contents. The mind does what it does, but when you look at its movements with focused attention, you empower its presence. Most people energize the content of the mind so intensely that it seems to overtake them. If you are caught up in this movement, your focus is not on reality of what you are, but rather it is chained to the mind's content, as you have become a slave to your addiction. If you find this invitation to be difficult, to sense your most primary self, I invite you to become open to establishing some sort of devotion that gives regular attention to the healing of this addiction. As you do so, you discover tiny gaps in your thoughts, in the quiet space between the thoughts. Healing waits to be discovered. I'll spend more time later on addressing this point of devotion as a practice for calming the energy of your mind. As you begin to see this presence within you that has always been there with more clarity, I ask with great sincerity, what is this? In asking the question, what is this, you are invited to ask without seeking an answer, rather than asking as if it's an acknowledgement from within yourself that says you are willing to discover something other than what you think you know. Your most profound spiritual insights will come from asking deep questions without looking for an answer. See the depth in this. When you ask a question, usually the mind has some sort of outcome in mind or an agenda. There is oftentimes an answer that is hoped for, and because of this you may find yourself asking manipulative questions to get the answers you want to hear. This isn't genuine self-inquiry. Asking with genuine conscious intent is a movement of sincerity, deep honesty and deep discovery. If you want to know the deepest truths, you must let go of everything that is thought to be true. For if you enter into self-inquiry believing that you know something, you reject anything that might threaten what you think you already know, which of course restricts the flow of truth. This points towards a most sincere willingness, humility and courage beyond measure. I say this because the one who wishes to discover the most amazing depth of self, must be willing to give up everything that is clung to in the mind. To enter into this space, you must be totally naked. You must give up the idea that says you are better than anyone else. You must give up the notion that others are less lovable. You must let go of the belief that says you know what is right and wrong, good and bad, as it relates to what happens in your world. The question is, do you know with certainty that others are less lovable? Or do you only think that? Do you know with great certainty that what other people do is wrong, or do you just believe that? To proclaim that you know it as truth, as absolute, you are saying you're right and your right is the only right, your good is the only good. Or this may be more appropriately stated as, your God is the only God. What do you know with absolute certainty? For the serious student, I would suggest to stop right now and go and sit quietly for 30 minutes and let such a question penetrate your core. Before continuing, this is not a trick question. There is a very real and profound discovery waiting to be seen. and it rests in the one thing which you can know with absolute certainty. The difference between knowing something and believing something is in knowing something, zero doubt exists. To say you are 99% sure is also to say that you don't know. You only believe. This is something that I don't need to spend much time on, since if you simply get honest with yourself, you will recognize that much of what you think you know is not what you know, but only what you believe. To believe in something is not to know it, but only to see it as possible. For when you know, belief is no longer necessary. In a sense, it's kind of like believing there is a hand at the end of your arm when you are staring right at it. It's not necessary to believe that which is clear as day. This is the clarity I point to, knowing with certainty what is true about the truth of you. Perhaps it would be more appropriately stated as a clarity that points towards a knowing of what you are not. As this truth becomes more and more clear, suffering falls away and conflict drops. This is simply because suffering is a result of not seeing the self clearly and looking to find the self externally where the self is not. By realizing the self cannot be good or bad, you give up the fight that wants to define self, others, and life as good or bad. Of course, it is not to say that this fight ends completely right away, for you must allow this truth to penetrate deep within your being. You must embody the truth rather than merely think about it. This embodiment occurs naturally as you become more and more willing to lay down the fight as it arises. If you get into an argument about who is right and who is wrong, this truth releases the need to expend energy on something that can never be defined, thus leaving you available to not engage in an experience that creates suffering or conflict, allowing you to remain as you are, rather than giving chase after a self that can only be whole if an argument is perceived as being one. This is the unfolding of light in your world, to see truth and to allow fear to fall away. This is the meaning behind the words, "Truth shall set you free." Light is the truth of reality. Darkness is the absence of this light of truth. When you live from anywhere other than truth, it is as if your world becomes dark. When I say dark, I mean in the sense of living asleep. In this darkness you become confused and unguided, as you simply cannot see clearly. In darkness you serve the dream that binds you to the light of truth of reality, blinds you to the light of truth of reality. This pointer towards light and dark has been referenced for thousands of years. It has taken the form of stories that use concepts and imagery with the hope of pointing to the truth within you. However, you have perverted this pointer with the intent of defining one as right and the other as wrong. In saying that darkness is wrong, you proclaim it is void of value and therefore run. In your running from darkness, you miss the lesson that simply wants to point to light. You run as if the solution is somewhere out there. So you run to the external, hoping it will take away the darkness. The truth of the matter is that there is nothing external or outside of you that can remove the darkness. Nor is there anything outside of you that can create the light you crave so desperately. Turning on the light is simply a matter of openness and perception. Just like when you argue about something that means nothing, the moment you see clearly the irrelevance of your argument, you give up the argument. In giving up the argument or seeing clearly, you return to your natural state, the state where conflict does not reside. All of your suffering is simply an indication that there is an absence of light, an absence of seeing reality clearly. What keeps you in the dark is your insistence upon holding on to non-truth with an attempt to solidify who you think you are. You hold on to the self that wants to be right. You hold on to the self that wants to know who is wrong. Again, such things are unknowable, since such things do not ever truly exist in reality. The movement of light transcends good and bad, for it sees both as equally valid. Light represents clarity. It represents life's most natural state of being. And when you see life as it naturally is, the light enters your world and transforms everything. To illustrate how this plays out in your world, you can imagine coming across a most beautiful rose. With this rose comes a vine that is full of thorns. As you attempt to grab the vine, you notice the pain that comes with being struck by the thorns. If your perception is clouded, you might notice that the vine is coming out of the dirt, and you begin to stomp on the dirt as if it was responsible for your pain. You may kick, scream, and blame as you become convinced that the source of your pain stems from the dirt. Just as in your personal suffering, you tend to kick and scream by blaming others and life's events as the culprit. Clarity happens when you pay more attention to the moment and realize that what hurts is holding on. As it becomes more and more clear that suffering is created by your incessant effort to hold on to that which was never meant to be held on to, what happens? Quite simply and naturally, you let go. The result of letting go is the end of suffering in that eternal moment. When you are clear, notice how there is no effort on your part to let go. Seeing that your pain is a result of hanging on, you realize that you can still enjoy the flower and share its space. However, there isn't a need to hold on to it or possess it. This is why striving to awaken is pointless. By turning awakening into a goal, it insinuates that there is a necessary effort on your part. In truth, all it takes is a willingness to see clearly. The natural state of your hand is to be open, just as the natural state of your being is to open as well. The effort comes from believing you must do something in order to experience wholeness, which is a delusion that keeps you from seeing clearly. For if you believe you must do something, you constantly look for the future to find wholeness, rather than recognizing it as already present. Such a thing can keep you blinded for many years, or many lifetimes. Just as in holding water, if you grasp at it, it slips through your fingers. If you hold your hands open and gently allow it to be, it stays with you. This points to an effortless way of living that awaits you as you become one who sees life clearly. It may seem as if it takes tremendous effort to live life. This is only because you feel separate from life, thinking you must do something in order to be fulfilled. What is being missed is that you are not separate from life's movement. The same force that moves the planet around the sun is the same power that wants to move through you. However, you have created a limited self that believes its power to be limited. And because this is believed as true, it becomes your experience. Just as you believe a stick to be a rattlesnake, you become fearful. It can seem to be a scary thing to just let go and allow life to do what it does. However, this fear of letting go is an attempt to protect something that isn't even there. So the more you allow clarity to arise, you discover with great ease that letting go is very natural. In this you may see that what is being asked of you is not necessarily to let go, but only to see clearly. As you see clearly, this letting go happens naturally. Allow a sense of freedom to be recognized, as you realize that you don't have to find the effort to let go, but only to have the willingness to see what is true, and then letting go will happen at its perfect timing. In this way you won't feel as though you are incomplete or invalid if you don't let go, or if you don't do something. Your wholeness isn't determined by action, or even by seeing, because you are already whole. Although to experience your wholeness as reality, you must see the self clearly. So seek not to find wholeness, but rather to be willing to see the barriers that obstruct your vision from seeing your true and whole self, as you are in this moment. As you are in this moment. This is similar to saying that you are already enlightened, and you only unlighten your experience by hanging on to that which is not real. You separate yourself from now by looking for yourself where you are not. You can see how this unfolding isn't necessarily a game of finding yourself, but rather a game of discovering the roadblocks that keep you from seeing the self you have always been. This truth can create a dramatic change of focus, turning your quest inward rather than looking for a self that exists externally. If you insist on finding yourself, you are proclaiming that you are not already here. Therefore, the simple act of looking for a self implies that you are not the self. This simple act of movement of perception creates an experience where you feel separate from life, as you convince yourself that your wholeness must be found in some other moment than now. The power of insight is that it acts like a wind in your sail to keep you to realign perception, to help you to realign perception to be more in alignment with your highest self. The challenge, though, is to recognize the wind or the insight not as the light itself, but rather just as a pointer to the light that you already are. You can see this play out as you cling to words, believing that the words must be right because they assist in your growth or discovery. However, the light is not in words. The light is in the one who is open to see the truth within oneself. If you are fooled into believing the words are where the discovery comes from, you put the light outside of the self once again.